Dans la communauté burundaise, les femmes handicapées ont beaucoup de problèmes concernant la discrimination. Donc, les femmes burundaises sont discriminées.
So in the Burundian community, women with disabilities have a whole series of discrimination that they have to face, including prejudice, because a woman with disability is considered as is treated as if she had a divine punishment, and that she is treated as someone who doesn't have any rights.
Est-ce que vous êtes en train d'attendre?
Can you hear us?
Vous attendez?
Oui, bien sûr. Merci.
Est-ce qu'on peut continuer?
Can we continue? Can we continue?
Comme les Burundais aussi, notre pays se trouve dans la région de l'Afrique de l'Est. Ici en Afrique de l'Est aussi, la femme handicapée subissent beaucoup de violences. Par exemple, les hommes employés à violer les personnes handicapées, c'est quoi qui va s'enrichir? C'est pourquoi beaucoup de femmes handicapées subissent la violence sexuelle.
Okay, so there's a lot of superstition in our country, in the East Africa in general, but also in Burundi. And women with disabilities are subjected to sexual violence by men who believe that they're going to become wealthy by abusing them sexually. And the same thing is true for albinos, and many people here in East Africa torture albinos and kill them and sell their body parts because they can become wealthy with their body parts. And this is the same thing for women with disabilities. Men believe that they can become wealthy when they have sexual relations with women with disabilities. Many families here in Burundi use their handicapped children for prostitution and for begging to earn money and to give money for their families. And so the children are exploited. And children do not have the same rights as other children, and they're used to work as prostitutes in order to feed the family. Many people here in Burundi see that people who have disabilities are incapable of procreating and or of having sexual relations. And so this is what they believe, and that's what their belief system is. The society in Burundi also believes that women with disability are people who have no rights, but people who need aid and or charity. And so in other words, they have no rights.
Dans notre communauté ici au Burundi,
in our society in Burundi, what we experience is that our parents do not communicate with their young daughters concerning their sexuality. So parents do not talk about sexuality with their children, and because it's a taboo, they don't give them any advice on sexuality, and so they cannot protect themselves. So women and young women who have disabilities have no information, and it's a taboo, and so they have no information.
Donc, c'est inaccessibilité aux services de la santé sexuelle.
So now concerning sexual reproductive health services, compared to other women who don't have a disability, there is a difference because women with disabilities do not have access to sexual and reproductive health services. So there are many obstacles. For example, buildings that provide these services or hospitals have steps, and there's no elevator. And so a person with a disability who uses a electric chair cannot get access to these buildings because there's no ramp if they're using a wheelchair. There's also most of whom cannot communicate with a woman or a young girl with a disability. And if the latter wants to use these services, they can't communicate. And this is true for people who cannot see. For example, a woman who cannot see is prescribed medication, but she can't read the information about the medication, and there's no way for her to learn about it.
Ici, au Burundi, si une
In
femme
Burundi, if a woman with a disability cannot negotiate her sexual practices and does everything that the man tells her to do, the man commands and the woman is forced to accept, and that's why there's so many women who have disabilities who become pregnant each time that they have sexual relations. And they can't defend themselves because they have to accept everything that the man tells them to do.
Ici au Burundi aussi, ici chez nous.
In Burundi, there are social norms that are such so that if a man marries a woman with a disability, then it's believed that this man will not be respected and will not know peace. And so that's the issue that men face when they have a long-term relationship with a woman with disabilities. And so it's a problem with the male mentality in our society.
Ici au Burundi aussi, il y a notre situation.
In Burundi, we have a situation where many young girls and mothers have no decision-making power concerning their sexual health. And so if a man rapes them, they can't refuse. They can't say no, and that's why there are many unwanted pregnancies, sexual violence, and sexually transmitted diseases. So a woman has to obey and do everything that the man tells her to do. So this is why women with disabilities have to do everything that the man tells them to do, and they can't make any decisions on their own concerning their own sexual and reproductive health. So, for example, if they want to interrupt their pregnancy, they cannot make that decision on their own. Many women who have a disability in Burundi have very little knowledge concerning their rights to sexual and reproductive health. So they have very little information. And because they don't have information about their sexual health, it means that they don't have access to services because they don't have the information concerning sexual and reproductive health services. And this is why there's a lack of access to these services. And many people in Burundi believe that a woman who has a disability in Burundi really has no right to access this information. And so we're trying to raise awareness so that people understand that they don't have access. It's important to give information about sexual and reproductive health rights for women with disabilities. So facing all these issues has helped us identify an approach so that we can solve these problems. First of all, we need to train trainers in sexual and reproductive health. We need to train them on how to teach women how they can access these systems. And second, there needs to be an awareness concerning the sexual and reproductive health for women with disabilities and their husbands and their partners. So we need to have an awareness campaign for women and their husbands and partners on sexual and reproductive health services, so that a person with a disability can access these services. So in order for a person with a disability to have access, we have identified the necessary advocacy and training in sign language for the personnel that works in sexual and reproductive health services, so that they can communicate with persons who can't hear, and so that they can have access. And then the awareness tools need to be translated into sign language and Braille, but many people who have disabilities who can't read, they don't know how to read. So they don't understand. So these tools need to be translated to sign language so that they can see pictures and understand. The same thing for Braille. So sometimes people with disabilities can't read or understand sign language, and so this needs to be translated so that people with disabilities can understand these awareness tools. At the same time, when it comes to translation, we had to create sketches to show a person with a disability how they can fight against violence committed based on their gender and their handicap. So the goal of these approaches and these activities is we want women with disabilities to fully enjoy their health as much as possible without any discrimination. And so Burundian society should not discriminate based on a disability. That's no reason to discriminate against a woman. I thank you very much. Thank you. And I am happy to answer your questions and receive your comments. Thank you. If there's something that you haven't understood, please ask so that I can clarify.